So approaching the vehicle, I'm going to start with my 3 L's: leaning, leaks, and lights. First L is I'm going to check for leaks, make sure I don't have any leaks. Then I'm going to check for leaning. Well, why would the vehicle be leaning? 3 reasons: flat tire, broken suspension, or an unevenly distributed load. Then I'll check the last L, which would be my lights. Starting up top, I have my clearance lights up top. Make sure that they're amber in color, not chipped, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, clean and free of debris and moisture. Then I have my left blinker, right blinker, 4-ways, bright lights. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, clean and free of debris and moisture. Then my license plate, I want to make sure it's visible and clean and free of debris. Come over here. I have mirror brackets. I want to make sure that they're not bent, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured. Then I'm going to go underneath the hood. Starting on this side, I'm going to start with my coolant reservoir. Make sure it's not bent, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, and it has no visible leaks. Well, how do I know it doesn't have any? It's field of operating range. How would I know it's field of operating range? Well, I'll check through the sight glass, or if it's cool enough, check through the top. Then I have general hoses and wires. Make sure that the hoses have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured on each end with no visible leaks. Then my electrical lines. Make sure I don't have any frayed wires. Then I'm going to come down to my alternator. Make sure my alternator is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, and has no burnt or frayed wires. I also want to note that it's belt driven. Then I'm going to go down to my water pump. Make sure my water pump is not bent, cracked, or broken, properly mounted and secured, no visible leaks. That's also belt driven. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect the belt. Make sure the belt has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured, and no more than 3/4 of an inch of play when you push on it. On this side, I happen to have my oil, dipstick, and fill tube. Make sure that they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I also want to check the oil. How I do that is I pull the dipstick, wipe it off, put it back in, pull it back out, and make sure it's in operating range. What else got? On this side, I want to start with my power steering reservoir. Make sure it's not bent, broken, and cracked, properly mounted and secured, no visible leaks, and fill the operating range. Check it through the sight glass or from the top. This hose, I'm going to follow this hose because it leads me to my power steering pump. Now my power steering pump is gear driven. It has fluid in it, so I want to make sure it has no visible leaks and make sure it's not bent, broken, and cracked, properly mounted and secured. From there, I'm going to go into my steering linkage. Okay, my steering linkage. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. It doesn't have too much or any excessive play. Then I have my power steering gearbox. It's also gear driven. Make sure it has no visible leaks. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I have my pitman arm. Make sure my pitman arm is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My castle nut and cotter keys. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My drag link is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My upper, and I also have a lower, control arm. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. And then I have my tie rod. Make sure my tie rod is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. I'll go to my suspension. I have my front and my rear spring mounts. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My leaf springs. Make sure they're not scissoring. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. My shock absorber. Make sure it has no visible leaks. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Now I'm going to go into the brakes. The first braking item is my air compressor. Now note that that'll be in different spots on different vehicles. This one just so happens to be right here. I'm going to check and make sure that it has no audible leaks. Note that it's also gear driven. And make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my brake hose. Make sure my brake hose has no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured with no audible leaks. My brake chamber with the clamps. Make sure they're not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, and has no audible leaks. My slack adjuster and push rod. Make sure it's not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted and secured, no more than 1 inch of play. Then I come down to my brake linings. Okay, make sure my brake linings, 3 things: no fluid on them, no heat stress, and not worn dangerously thin, less than 1/4 of an inch. Then on the outside of that, I have my brake drum. Make sure my brake drum, 2 things: no fluid on it and no signs of heat stress. and not been broken or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my inner rim. Make sure it has no illegal welds, not been broken or cracked, properly mounted and secured. The sidewalls of my tires. Make sure they have no abrasions, bulges, cuts, properly mounted and secured. The tops of my tire. I want to make sure that it is worn evenly with a minimum of 4/32 of an inch of tread depth, and these cannot be recapped. Then I come to my outer rim. Make sure my outer rim is not been broken or cracked, properly mounted and secured. No illegal welds and no rust treads. Valve stem and cap. Make sure it's not been broken or cracked, properly mounted and secured. No audible leaks. This is where I would use a tire pressure gauge to check and make sure that my tires are aired up properly. Lug nuts. Make sure they're all present. They're all tight. No metal shavings or shiny thread. Not been broken or cracked, properly mounted and secured. Then I have my hub sealed and capped. Make sure it's not been broken or cracked, properly mounted, secured, no visible leaks. Also want to make sure that the fluid level's in operating range. How would I check it? Well, you can look through the sight glass or you can take out the rubber seal.